Good evening. Angela Renhal will say good evening to some of our English speaking people and our Spanish speaking people here tonight. Angela?
Hi, good evening. My name is Angela Rangel, and I will be interpreting the meeting into Spanish. If anybody needs interpreting services, please come by and pick up a device. Hola, buenas noches. Mi nombre es Ángela Rangel. Estaré interpretando la reunión en español. Si alguien necesita servicios de interpretación, por favor pase para que tome un dispositivo. Gracias.
Welcome to the Modesto City Schools 1410th regular board meeting. The meeting is now called to order. In closed session, the board took no action. Please stand and join me for a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Well, we are lucky to have two students this evening joining us from Franklin Elementary School. And we have Natalie Duarte. Do you want to step forward? Good evening. Sixth grader Natalie takes her education very seriously and works hard to make honor roll. She's a leader on campus by serving as a member of the Franklin Student Council and active in the school's recycling program. During her free time, she enjoys creating artwork and spending time with her family. Natalie looks forward to being involved with the AVID program next year. Good for you. As she plans to attend college and pursue a career as a teacher. And with her is also Gabriel Ramirez Alvarado. Gabriel's a fourth grader who loves to read. He takes pride in his attendance rate and punctuality, missing only 2 days of school so far this year, and he has never been tardy. Good for you. Gabriel's a real peace builder with a positive attitude and encouraging words for everyone. He loves to play basketball and enjoys being a good role model for his two younger brothers, who are 1 and 2 years old. Gabriel plans to attend college and hopes to help people in his community by being a police officer. Great job. All right, students, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, students, for leading us in the pledge. I'm going to go down and give you your certificates.
Good evening, everyone. It's time for our announcements, and it's great to see some familiar faces in the room here tonight. First, we're going to start off with our character education recognition. And Beard Elementary, we have Julian Macy being recognized for responsibility, and Heather Phelps and Beth Weston, the principal. Are you here? Come on up. And is Julian here? Julian is not here, but we are going to talk about Julian anyway. And so somewhere you'll see this on videotape or something. So who's going to be talking?
She's going to be talking. All yes.
It's very unfortunate that he's not here. He's a great student. I find him amazing. I explain why I'm nominating him. His character trait that he exhibits is responsibility. This boy is phenomenal. Julian Macy is truly an example of a responsible student. He comes to school on time with completed work and is eager to do a job well done, which continues his growth and motivation to learn. He is dependable and he's very accountable and always seeks to help others. Julian is a take charge individual and faces consequences and ensures others that they face consequences of their own actions as well. He is one you can always lean on in a time of need, and he is one to foster excitement for others. I highly recommend without reservation this fine young man, and I'm pleased to teach him. I wish he was standing here. Is Julian Macy. Julian Macy has successfully passed the state test for 5th grade and passed the mile. So I'm super excited.
We will take a picture anyway. Next, for Muir Elementary, we have Nathaniel Fuller for Compassion. Nathaniel, come on up. And Lori Klein and Helen Bangerman are here to speak. Come on up. Helen and Lori. And Nathaniel? Nathaniel is with Julian here tonight, I think so.
I am so proud to have nominated Nathaniel. He is getting this for Compassion, but Helen Bingaman and I, his teacher, I'm his resource specialist, we've seen great growth in him, and he exhibits a lot of character traits, and we so wish that he would have been here tonight. He's going through a very hard time, but he's got determination. And so I'll read what I wrote. He's a very compassionate student. He always looks out for the needs of others. Recently, a fellow student had a death in the family, and the friend's family specifically requested for Nathaniel to spend time with their son in his time of grief. He is kind and caring to other students and resource when sometimes it's easy to make fun of others, and he understands their struggles. He escorts his little brother to and from kindergarten every day, and he's a wonderful example of compassion. And I could go on, like perseverance, diligence, whatever, but we'll stop right there.
Well, thank you. We'll take a picture. Thank you. Arya Gandhi is being recognized for responsibility on Davis High School with Trina Mazza, the teacher. So come on up. Congratulations.
I'm proudly nominating Arya Gandhi for character education recognition. While I am specifically nominating him for his responsible work ethic, he possesses all of the positive character traits that teachers value in a diverse classroom. He takes ownership for his own learning and those around him. For when there is a problem with an assignment, we're all digital and there are a lot of problems, he politely communicates the issue and assists as needed to solve it. Plus, he is one of the first students to start his work. I have become dependent on him to voice concerns and questions others may have but are hesitant to ask. As a result, he has established himself as a role model for others who are also good students. But more than this, he is a good person who makes good choices. Thank you, Arya.
Congratulations. Let's come over here. We'll take a picture. No, go ahead. We just had somebody walk in the back. Is there someone here? Is it Julian? For character education recognition tonight, we have Julian Macy for responsibility. Julian, come on up. Beard Elementary and Heather Phelps and Beth Weston, the principal, are here. Julian, congratulations. Go ahead and read it again.
Okay.
He needs to hear this.
I'm sorry. Character trait that I have chosen for you is responsibility, Julian. Julian Macy is a true example of responsible student. He comes to school on time with completed work and is eager to do a job well done, which continues his growth and motivation to learn. He is dependable and accountable and always seeks to help others. Julian is a take charge individual and faces consequences and ensures others that they face consequences of their own action as well. He is one who you can always lean on in a time of need, and he is one that can foster his excitement for others. I highly recommend, without reservation, this fine young man that I am so very pleased to teach, Julian Macy.
Thank you.
We're going to take a picture. Sometimes we just need a dress rehearsal to make sure we get it right. Now we have some special recognitions. The Davis High School FFA poultry team. The Davis High School poultry team. So why don't you come on up? As they're coming up, they placed 5th in the nation at the National FFA Poultry Evaluation Career Development Event. And today we have Tammy Burris and we have Principal Sarah Gill here. Would you like to introduce all the students, or would you like for me to? Why don't you do that?
Good evening, everyone. A few months ago, I had the pleasure of coming and recognizing these 4 outstanding individual students for placing first in the state last spring at the FFA state convention. And then so in October, they traveled to Tennessee. Did I get that right? Indianapolis. They've been traveling the states on tour for their poultry team, but they went to Indianapolis in October and placed 5th in the nation, which is outstanding. They are a fine group of individuals, so let me introduce them to you. We have Callie Twist here, second, Isaiah Langpap, Madison Cervantiwood, and Alina Biziava. I was practicing their names, trying to get them pronounced. Yeah, Biziava. So these students were here early. They're dressed professional, and I walked in. They beat me here tonight, and I just said these are just the great skill sets that FFA teaches these young people. So they're an outstanding group. And I also want to give a shout out to their teacher and advisor, Tammy Burris, who couldn't make it here tonight, but put in a ton of time helping prepare these students for this wonderful team award. In addition, all 4 of them earned a gold placement, which is absolutely unheard of for a team to all place at that level individually. And then Isaiah actually placed 14th in the nation. So quite outstanding young individuals. So congratulations.
Great. Thank you very much. If you could take that for Tammy. And we are going to get a picture, but we're going to have to scoot way together. Great. Thank you. Next, employees making a difference. The board would like also to recognize the Modesto City Schools nominees for the Stanislaus County Office of Education Employees of the Year, and also that's in conjunction with the Association of California School Administrators, or ACSA. The program honors outstanding classified employees. Unfortunately, nominee Nancy Verancio, a nutrition services assistant at Burbank, could not attend this evening, but we do have a few others. And so when I call your name, if you could come up with your principal for a quick picture, we'll do that. And we have a certificate also. So the first one is from Enox High School, Candelario Monroy, with assistant or associate principal Michael Schroyer. Congratulations, well done.
Great job. Thank you. All right, we'll do a quick picture.
Our next nominee is from Lakewood, Jamie Murrell. She's an instructional paraprofessional, deaf and hard of hearing, and Principal Denise Powell. Congratulations again. Next nominee is Vi Tran, head custodian at Bret Harte, and Principal is Marla Conte. And that young man we got to know at Bret Harte during the end of December and the beginning of January. That guy was amazing. And the final nominee is Gloria Tellez, from School Secretary at Grigori, and Principal Derek Penley. Gloria? Finally, 6 nominees from throughout the county will be considered for the California Department of Education's Classified Employee of the Year program. This year, Jill Hayes, a typist clerk 2 at Grace Davis High School, was selected as one of these nominees. Principal Sarah Gill, and Jill, if you could come up here, and Sarah, maybe you can share a little bit about why you nominated Jill. Jill Hayes.
Anybody that walks into Davis High School automatically sees this lady first at the front desk, welcoming, smile. You can just see her permeate positivity, compassion, whatever the need is of the parent or the student that walks in the office. And she's so deserving. She makes an absolute difference on our campus for everyone. Myself, staff, students, parents. She's just such an asset to Davis High School and Modesto City Schools, and has a true heart for our students. So she's so deserving.
We wish Jill the best at the next level. Next, we are to our MCS Heroes part of our recognition. And the first one is Adria Sanders. Adria is a campus supervisor at Mark Twain Junior High School and was nominated by Hamilton's son, a teacher at Mark Twain. And today, Socorro Hernandez is here to talk about Adria.
Good evening. I'm presenting this on behalf of Hamilton's son, but 100% agree with everything that he has written. So I'd like to share a little bit of what he shared about Adria. Adria is more than a campus supervisor. Adria Sanders is a loving, caring, and compassionate person who truly cares for and watches out for as many students as possible. Adria would greet students every day with a hello, an ear-to-ear smile, and a warm hug. She was also supportive as she offered positive advice and guidance. Adria still does this for students every day. She goes above and beyond what her job entails and deserves to be recognized for the lives she has positively affected. Adria is a wonderful example of someone who treats every person with kindness and respect.
Reading about great people never gets old, I tell you that right now. Next, we have Gene Taylor. He's the lead custodian 2 at Beyer High School, nominated by Jennifer James and Corin Kane, the library media teacher and the instructional materials clerk at Beyer. So, Gene, come on up. And is it Corin? Corinne?
Gene is amazing. Whether he is covering the shift or working his regular night shift, he's always checks in to see if we need anything special accommodations. He is a great leader and a hard worker and goes out of his way to ensure everything is neat and tidy. His work ethic is remarkable, and Beyer's lucky to have him. And honestly, I'm surprised he came tonight because he's on shift and worries about missing the time away.
Well, Gene, we're glad that you're here. You got to get a picture. Oh, picture? You cannot get away yet. Thank you, Gene. And tonight, the next MCS hero is Lori Gaines. She's a teacher at Grigori High School. And Lori, come on up. And Lori is nominated by retired Superintendent Pam Abel, but presenting the award tonight will be Senior Director, Educational Services, Brad Goodell.
So tonight, this is like a mini family reunion. I had the distinct pleasure of working at Grigori with Lori for years, knowing her before that, and then also working with someone else that we'll talk about here in a second, way back when. But, you know, they say hero, I think the epitome of a hero is someone that is willing to give their life for somebody else. In this case, Lori was willing to give a piece of herself for someone else. Lori donated one of her kidneys to a colleague's spouse and someone that we all know as family. And this happened literally 2 days after Christmas, December 27th. For those of you that know Lori, she's not a very excitable or stubborn person. So when she got this in her head that this was going to happen, I don't think anybody was going to talk her off this. She has 2 very small children at home, and just is a very giving and wonderful woman. And so with that, definitely the picture of what a hero is. So thank you, Lori, for that.
Lori, come back up here for a second. Come on up. Dorlin, come on up. Do you like the microphone?
Oh my God, hero! That doesn't even begin to describe her. She saved my life. Seriously. Oh, hi, I'm Dorlin Harrison. I am blessed to have known her and work with her, and she's absolutely fabulous for kids. My son was lucky enough to have her as well, and she is just phenomenal in the classroom. But above that, she is just a phenomenal human being. I've been sick for years, and I actually never thought this was going to happen. And truly, she's a lifesaver. And I can never thank you enough. This is like a very small token, but thank you for everything. Thank you.
Could we have a picture of just the 3 of you, if that's okay? Thank you very much. Dorlin, great to see you.
All right. We'll give a few minutes for people to walk out.
Running water across the water. You should be sitting with your lawyer, not here.
Yeah. To the fact that if you wish to address the board during the period for public comment on a subject not on agenda, you must complete the public presentation card request and submit it to the board president prior to the period for public comment. Only those who have submitted cards will be called upon to speak, and no cards will be accepted after the period has begun. Every person who wishes to address the board must fill out a card. You will find the cards in the lobby. The period for public comment is limited to 30 minutes. Time will be allotted equally to individuals based on the number of request cards submitted. The minimum for any one speaker is 3 minutes. I also want to remind you that if you wish to make a complaint against a specific district employee, you should follow the district's personnel complaint procedure. Copies of that procedure are also available in the lobby, as are agenda copies which outline the procedures we will observe during the period for public comment. The right to address the board does not exempt the speaker from any potential liability for defamation. The law limits the response of board members and prohibits the board from taking any formal action. At this time, I have 2 cards. So this moves us on to item A6, which is the approval of the consent agenda. We have a number of issues in that. We have Trustee Grembo has asked for us to vote separately on items C8 and 9. So we'll look at those first, and then I have a conflict on item C12. So we'll vote on that one separately as well. So let's start with are there any comments on items C8 or 9 from the public? Seeing none. All right, I'm looking for a motion for approval of C8 and 9. It's been moved by Trustee Walker and seconded by Trustee Marks. All those in favor of items C8 and 9 on the consent agenda say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Okay. Then items C8 and 9 pass with 1 dissenting vote with Trustee Grembo. Then we're going to approve, I'd like to have a motion for approval of the consent agenda minus item C12. So is there a motion for the approval of the consent agenda minus C12 and C8 and 9? We've just approved that. And that's a motion by Trustee Brown and a seconded by Trustee Marks. All those in favor? Aye.
So now we have item C12, and we need a motion to approve item C12. To the public, comment on C12. First rodeo here. Seeing no comment, do we have any board comment on the issue? I have a motion for C12. So moved. And seconded by Trustee Marks. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed?
This takes us down to item A7, which is the approval of the order of discussion action items. It's been requested by Trustee Walker that we move items, just the order of item 5 and 6, and have item B6 go before item B5. Is there any discussion on that? Would that be okay with staff? Is Mr. Walterstorff here? Is he here?
See him here, but that is okay with staff.
Okay. And so with that change, is there any public comment on that? Seeing no public comment, is there anyone on the board wanting to make a motion to approve the order of discussion action items with the change of item B? The order of the items B5 and 6, just switch the order of the 2. Yes. Yeah, I think you can make a motion on that. It's not money. So, all right, there's been a motion by Student Representative Jimenez, and then there's a second by Trustee Walker. All those in favor, say aye. 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 All right, the motion passes unanimously. All right, that takes us on to items A8, which is a period for public presentation. I have 2 cards at this time. So the first card is Sherry Nelson. Good evening. Good to see all of you. I just wanted to, on behalf of all...
There you go.
Okay, take 2. Well, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to say on behalf of our staff and parents of Connecting Waters Charter Schools that we were so thankful and grateful to each and every one of you for listening to us last month, January 22nd, as we shared our passion for our school, for our students, and our petition for Connecting Waters Central Valley. We want to also
extend another invitation to our board members to please come and visit our resource center. And I'd like to thank Superintendent Ridquist and his staff for coming and visiting with us on January 31st. So I do look forward to seeing you soon this month for our approval, hopefully, of our charter petition. So thank you once again.
Thank you. Right. The second card I have is Brandon Price. Good evening.
Hello. Hello, MCS board and members. Mr. Rehnquist. He used to be my math teacher. Anyways, my name is Brandon Price, and I'm a music teacher for our district. I teach at Mark Twain Junior High. I teach beginning band, advanced band, orchestra. I also teach at Burbank Elementary School, 5th and 6th grade band. I'm also the K-8 instrumental music chairperson for our district, and I've come to speak for two reasons. First, I'd like to thank you for your leadership and service to our wonderful district. I know more often than not, you probably hear a lot of criticism, but today I'm here to praise you and thank you. On behalf of the students and our staff of our K-8 programs, I'd like to thank you for keeping music alive in our district. Thank you for making a continuing effort to help pay for and replace broken, unrepairable instruments. Because of your leadership, if we have not only been able to provide quality instruments to our students, which could never really afford to purchase or have their own instrument, but we've also been able to steadily increase the number of students involved in our instrumental music program to over 1,600 students. And just to give you some perspective, that's about 400 students more than we had 3 years ago. I want to also thank you. Please continue, and thank you for our continued support, because there's still hundreds of kids that we have on waiting lists every year that don't get to play an instrument. So thank you for the money, and hopefully we get more of it later on. That brings me to a second topic. I'd like to tell you that we do celebrate this great thing we have at our district by creating an annual music festival. So we have a performance on March 21st, 22nd, and 23rd at Johansen High School. Over those 3 nights, a group of elementary school schools, along with a junior high program, will perform selected music for family and friends. It's about 600 or so students every night. They range from 4th grade to 8th grade, and there's band and string kids that play together. And as a teacher, I've never felt more proud than to see those students out there having fun and really being really excited, and also seeing the awe from the crowd, seeing parents saying, wow, it's amazing seeing all those kids play together. So I invite all of you to come attend that performance. I'll be honest, I'm not sure. I know that you're very busy, but I think if any attendance to either that concert in the nighttime or even in the morning time, we do a dress rehearsal where we bus all the students into Johansen. And it's pretty amazing to see the teachers getting all 500 or so elementary school kids off that bus and get them practicing. It's a great thing to see, and I think you'd be really really amazed to see that too. So I know the staff and the music kids would be honored to be able to perform for you. So there's a flyer that I passed out, and I'll be emailing you later on officially. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Price. All right. Yeah, Trustee Brown has a question for Mr. Price. Do you have a moment?
I'd like you to tell us more about this waiting list. How can we, how many kids are on that waiting list? And what can be done to get them off that list and actually on instruments?
Just more instruments, and more time for teachers at sites. Right now, a full-time music teacher could be basically, they teach band, that's considered a 0.2. They teach strings, that's another 0.2. So they may be spread amongst 5 schools teaching different subjects. So the more time they're able to stay at a school, they can have more classes, and then the more instruments we have, we obviously can provide to more students in our district. So those would be the 2 things I would say.
And do you have a feel for how many kids are on that waiting list?
I would say it's maybe 500 or 600 kids. 700. It's about 20 or 30 kids at every site. Some sites, the big sites, have a lot more. I know at Burbank, I probably had about 25 kids who just wanted to play a band instrument that I didn't have. I have about 35 band instruments at Burbank Elementary School. I had about 70 or so kids wanting to do that. So,
So we have a huge correlation between music and mathematics.
yeah.
So I would just put my vote to the fact that the more kids we can put on instruments, the higher our math scores can rise. Let's work hard as a community and make that happen.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for coming and talking to the board. Thank you. And thank you for sharing your views with us this evening. All right. Okay, this takes us on to item B1, which is the student representative to the board report. Trustee Jimenez.
Good evening. The Interhigh Council is currently preparing for the 6th annual Tournament of Talent, which will take place on Thursday, May 3rd, in the Thomas Downey High School auditorium from 6 to 7:30 p.m. The council has created an MMC Team Handball League, which has begun practicing on the weekends to prepare for competitions between the 7 comprehensive high schools. Thank you.
All right, good job. Are there any questions from the board? Any comments from the audience? All right, seeing none, that takes us on to the Modesto Teachers Association. Thank you, Mr. Burton. All right, and that also takes us on to item B3, the California School Employees Association report. Good evening.
So I wasn't able to go home. Good evening. See if I can remember this. It's been a little bit of a while. And yes, the CSE president does exist, and this is probably one of the first times this year that I've gotten up. So good evening, board president, New Ellen, interim superintendent, Craig Ridquist, board members, and cabinet. So yes, it's kind of been a little bit while. Realize that I come from down south and I had 18 years of service, and I had complete bliss when I first moved up, and I didn't have to do this and get up to the board members that speak. So it's amazing how you forget after a little period of time. I'd like to thank the board and send out special thanks to Michelle Gutierrez for helping me stay on timelines regarding, where's it at? The recognition for the classified employees making a difference. If she didn't stay on me with the timelines, we probably would have blown them. So I'd like to spend a special thanks, because that was a special thing for the classified employees. I'd also like to see a lot of more administrators get involved with that coming forward next year. I think it's very important that we recognize our classified employees as we move forward. Thank you again for the MCS Heroes. That is a great program, and recognizing our classified employees, it's just a little bit does help our morale through our classified staff. And then there was the final one, of course. I'd like to thank Craig Ridquist for working in conjunction with classified employees and helping resolve a lot of issues that are coming through. It's helps classified when they realize that their concerns are being heard. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? All right, any comments from the audience? All right, seeing none, this takes us on to item B4, which is a request to address the board by the Healthy and Responsible Relationships Troop, HEART Coalition. Good evening.
Thank you for allowing us back. We were here last month to speak with you. I think we do have a presentation to share with you that was mailed to the board. I'm not sure. Which one is it? Yes. And
there it is.
All right, I'm Holly Grace Curry, and I am technologically challenged, so I'm going to do my best with this clicker here. I'm the youth program manager at Haven Women's Center. Haven is a private nonprofit that serves survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault and human trafficking. And we've been in the county for 40 years doing that work. I'm here tonight to share some of the prevention work that we're doing. February is National Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month. So I'm here with the HEART Troop, the Healthy and Responsible Relationships Troop. And we are really grateful for the time to speak with you tonight. Do you want to introduce yourself? Okay.
Hi, my name's Ben. I go to Enox. I'm just a freshman, and this is my first year at Hart and presenting to a board meeting.
Good deal.
I'm Cassandra Garcia. I'm a junior, and I go to Downey, and I was one of the founding members of the Downey branch at Hart last year during my sophomore year.
So the HEART program was piloted at Enox High School in 2015. We were funded through the Blue Shield of California Foundation in partnership with the California Adolescent Health Collaborative to do some teen dating violence prevention work at a school-based location. So we started at Enox. We were able to replicate that project at Downey in 2016. And I'm happy to say thanks to Sutter Health and their funding, we'll be branching out to Patterson High School and Del Puerto in the fall of 2018. So shout out to our partners who make our work possible. The United Way of Stanislaus County and also the San Joaquin Valley Health Fund has been very supportive of our work.
All right, so if I can ask of something from everyone sitting down, can I just have the third person sitting around this table stand up? So can you stand up, please? 1, 2. Can you stand up, please? 1, 2, 3. Can you stand? Yeah, just every third person. Just a little bit of a visual. Okay, so 1 in 3 students or adolescents nationwide suffers from abuse in a relationship. So that's about the amount of people standing up. And so this is a large issue. It's preventing students from coming to school. You're suffering from, it leads to depression, anxiety. Maybe you're too afraid to come to class. It's a real big issue, and this many people are suffering from it. You guys can sit down now if you want.
Thank you for being willing to stand. We do the classroom presentations, and to have a third of the room standing up, we'll often say, what if a bear was going to attack all of these students who are standing as soon as you walked out of the classroom? Do you think your parents would be worried about the bear? Do you think your teachers would be trying to do something about the bear? So thank you for playing along. I actually took the statistics from your Quick Facts online, and in 15-16, the total 7th to 12th grade student population was about 18,000 students. So 1 in 3 of those is 6,000 students. That's a lot of students just in Modesto City Schools who are likely to be facing some form of relationship abuse. In fact, it's the total students of Downey, Enox, and Davis high schools combined. So just to put a real face on this issue, do you want to talk about health risks?
Yes, some of the serious health risks that we can face are depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts or even attempts, disordered eating, unplanned pregnancy, or even STIs, and multiple sexual partners too. So this is really why we should really work trying to stop this in our teens. All right. So negatively impacts educational outcomes. So if students don't feel safe in their environment at school, they're not going to want to be there. If there aren't teachers or any staff preventing these people from being abused by anyone, they aren't going to feel that they're in a safe environment. And a school environment is supposed to be safe and empowering. And when there's students who aren't coming to class, who don't find going to school worth it, it's going to become a large issue for students trying to get their education. Yeah, and we would just like to mention that this often occurs on school grounds. It can even occur with friends, it can occur with partners, it can even occur with teachers and parents. And I think that's really important to note.
A lot of people think that teen dating violence is sort of like a light version or a junior version of domestic violence, and really it's actually quite lethal. I think the way that adolescents' brains and emotions are still developing fully, sometimes they act more impulsively, sometimes anger turns to rage, and it is actually quite a serious issue. So we do have some policy recommendations. This comes from the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence. They're the statewide coalition of domestic violence folks operating at the state level. These are their policy recommendations for creating safer schools for all students. And so we would really ask that you give some consideration of how we might be able to support this district-wide.
All right,
So one of our first recommendations is a lot of health classes don't really go in depth on how to prevent yourself from ending up in an abusive relationship, how to get out, what some of the signs are. So if we were able to incorporate all of these lessons, whether it be in a health class, a separate class, or just kind of into other classes that relate to the issue, any way we could kind of get the information out and make students aware would be beneficial.
And the California Healthy Youth Act actually requires conversations as part of comprehensive sex ed about trafficking, about consent, about harassment, about sexual assault, about dating violence. I feel like if we can stem the tide, so to speak, in some of this prevention work, that maybe I think that's where we can make the biggest impact.
Okay. All right. So another way we could prevent this is if we are training all of the staff at our schools on how to deal with this issue. So they should know how to handle it if a student comes to them and says, hey, I'm being harassed, I don't feel safe around this person, I'm in an abusive relationship. It shouldn't be difficult to at least have some sort of distance from this abuser, and the staff should be able to make students feel comfortable with giving this information instead of making them afraid to share it.
And I think it's important to train all campus adults on these topics, from custodians to the principal. It's not, sometimes admins receive the information and it doesn't always translate down to the people who are really boots on the ground with students. So campus security, who's serving lunch in the cafeteria. I mean, just down to the nitty gritty. Coaches have a huge role to play in the lives of students. So remembering to include all members of the campus community would be helpful. She's on a roll.
Okay. So we also need to start having conversations about this. It cannot just be something that our students are being taught. We have to be comfortable speaking about these issues because a lot of times they're hard to hear. But if we're made aware of what's happening and we're made aware that it is wrong to do this, it would become something more people know about, something more people are able to prevent in their immediate environment.
Awesome. And this kind of explicit district communication can come in a lot of forms. It could be a letter home at the beginning of the year. It could be a prominent statement in the student conduct handbook. It could be posters, on the hallways. Enox is a great example of how students blanket the hallways with posters about things that matter to them. You're not going to miss that it's homecoming because there's flyers everywhere. So you're not going to miss that relationship abuse is not tolerated on this campus if we have some kind of visual reminder everywhere for students. And I have access to lots of that stuff that I can provide for free, so it's not like it costs a lot of money. So the Heart Troop has been engaged in a lot of policy advocacy. We don't just work at the school level. We talk to community members. We're, again, really grateful to be here talking to you tonight. This is pictures from Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month in 2016. We went to the state capitol. I took 9 or 10 students from the Enox Heart Troop. That was before Downey was a thing, sorry. And we spoke on the steps of the Capitol. We talked to legislators about the same policy recommendations that we're making to you. We also do a lot of local education and outreach. These are pictures from our Sexual Assault Awareness Month activities in April at the State Theater. On the right is the Enox High School Multipurpose Room. We presented to all the juniors and seniors in some assemblies. And I know statistics can be numbing, so I tried to boil it down. But in our first full program, Year of Heart, these young people presented to 1,200 peers. 1,200. So I taught them what I know, and then I just sent them out like seeds to blossom in the world, And if every school had a heart program, then they could be educating each other, where it matters. In the next year, 16, 17, they presented to 1,750 students because now we had programs running at 2 school sites. We actually, how often do I ask you to present somewhere? Like,
pretty often.
All the time. So we're very busy. We have schools on a wait list who would love to have a heart program. It's just capacity, a capacity issue right now. We're only halfway through this school year, 17-18, but we expect to present to 1,825, mainly students. I mean, we talk to adults like you because we need your help sometimes, but we are mainly presenting to students, and it's mainly students presenting to students. This is from Modesto City Schools Day of Respect and Stanislaus County Office of Education's Friend to Friend Conference they hold every year at the Doubletree. We've been offered workshops there several years in a row. We have tried to gather data from recipients of our presentation, and it showed that 90% 96% of students who watch one of these heart presentations show an increase in knowledge about what dating abuse is and where to get help if they or somebody they know needs it. 96%. And 91% of attendees say they prefer to receive this information from peers, not from adults like me and you, but from their peers. So there really is a lot of value that you all are bringing to the world. The picture on the left was Equity on the Mall, an annual event that happens again at the state capitol. I'm sponsored by the San Joaquin Valley Health Fund. I took 9 students from Enox and Downey in the pouring rain. It was fabulous. We actually just went last week. You were there. And so the picture on the right is from just last week, and we were able to double our numbers. We had 16 students. Just really representing the power of the Central Valley. The HEART program has caught the attention of statewide partners, and we just want you to know that they're a little bit of a big deal in the domestic violence world, and so we didn't want you to be caught off guard if you heard someone talking about the really cool stuff happening right here. In 2016, we offered a PSA release party to the public. MJC offered us space. The Enox Heart Troop had created several public service announcements about adolescent relationship abuse. They conceived it, they filmed it, they staged it. I had nothing to do with any of it. It was very amazing, and I'd like to share one of them with you. Oh, if I know how. All right. Stepping away.
I love you. I love you too. Hey, what are you doing? I can't allow you to do this to me. Do what? You know exactly what I mean. I can't even trust you.
Hello, at least look at me when I'm talking to you. Sorry. You're such a goddamn idiot. Maybe you guys did what I told you. I'm gonna have to get pissed off at you, worthless piece of garbage.
So, do you want to go later?
I don't think I want to go to the park.
That's fine. We can go to the park another day.
I'm sweet. Hey, wait a minute. Oh, come on. I was just. Well, you gonna give me this acknowledgement now? Look, just listen to me.
No.
Wait, what?
No.
So yeah, February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month, but we really could use your help all year long. I know every issue has its month, everything has its season, but unfortunately this issue is not going away. These young people and 20 others who couldn't be here tonight because they have homework and jobs and siblings and things. They're working really hard at the school level to change the campus climate, to educate teachers, to be more supportive. But we could really use your help at the district level. Have anything to add? No? So you're welcome to follow us on social media, if you want to. We're not into coercing people to follow us online, but you can have access to the other PSAs and hear about what we're up to. And we absolutely invite further conversation. I can provide my contact information if you want to talk about. Haven provides free services. We would be happy to come out and educate staff and provide in-service trainings, whatever we can do to work together They say, well, I'm always saying teamwork makes the dream work. And we really do need your help.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any?
And then we would just like to thank you guys for actually listening to our presentation. We really appreciate it. And if you guys could do anything to help us, we would also really appreciate that too.
Any questions for us?
Good. I was just going to ask the board, are there any questions for our presenters this evening? Yes, Trustee Walker has a question.
It'll probably end up in Miss Mack's inbox. Only because when you listed off following the California Healthy Youth Act, it wasn't that long ago that was brought before the board by someone else. I have 2 daughters, so I'm all for your operation here. But my youngest just completed health class, and I remember every single topic you mentioned being covered. So based on my knowledge, I feel pretty confident saying we're doing that in those health classes. We have not, at this point, we're probably not exceeding, but we were exceeding those requirements in years past. And I know they brought in guest speakers and showed videos, and they went through the whole shooting match, if that's a good way to put it. Probably should have not used shooting here, but
that is correct. We have been doing it in our health class, but the law increased that to our junior highs, and we will be that is being added to our junior highs this May. So Modesto Center Pregnancy Center is helping us with those presentations starting in May.
thank you, and thank you for what you do. Again, I couldn't agree more on the idea that it doesn't need to be swept under the rug, and it is a big deal. And teenagers are teenagers, because I have 2 of them, and they can get sideways. And keep up the good work.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there any more questions from the board? All right, I wanted to say thank you as well. I have 2 teenagers, and so these are serious issues, and I think it is more prevalent than we know. And so I think that we do need to be addressing it. And I think it's great that you 2 young leaders are out there teaching your peers about this. And so hopefully the change happens and more kids learn about it and who to come to. And Trustee Brown has a question or a comment.
I'm going to go back to the waiting list question. How many of our schools within the district are on that waiting list, and what does it look like as far as advancing this to more of our campuses?
So I have teachers and counselors at Bayer who are ready to go. I just haven't had dedicated staff time to get out there. Modesto High has expressed interest, as well as Gregory and Davis. So it's not official wait list, it's just interest, like, hey, when you can get the heart program at my school, let me know. I think the added benefit is that, so these students are then presenting to all the freshman health classes. So they're doing that healthy relationships piece of Comp Sex Ed. So they're just taking care of it for teachers in a way that other students say they want to receive it. So I'm very thrilled that we're going to be in Patterson. I think the farther we can get out into the edges of the county, the better. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any more questions? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, are there any comments from the public? Yes, come on up.
I guess my name is Rose Mitchell. I'm chairperson of NAACP for Education.
Great.
And I'm also an active licensed clinical social worker. And I just want to commend these women. I'm very familiar with Haven. I've worked with Haven staff before. And I just want to punch up what they've been saying, because these statistics that they give, they're not joking about that. And I have a niece who is going into junior high next year, and she's getting nasty chat things on whatever it is, what the chat rooms are. But I mean, she's only 10, and this is starting to happen at, the 5th and 6th grade, this kind of behavior online. Of course, there's no dating or anything there, but, this stuff is going around, and it needs to be taken seriously. It needs to be dealt with. I think I was here for one of the meetings that a young man presented about the one of the acts, sex education acts, and he was concerned about the LGBT community. and his principal where he worked, wouldn't allow that to be brought into the school. And I don't know if that's the mindset of many of the teachers in schools that they work in, and even, you're talking about outlying areas such as Patterson, but Houston, all of these places need the opportunity to gain this information and somehow support it in their classrooms, in their curriculums or whatever, because it's serious. And you see how it affects young people when they don't know how to handle it. And parents aren't usually, I'm serious about it, and that's why my voice is shaking, because it means a lot that these kids are protected and that they have someone to talk to and go to and feel safe about it in their schools, in their homes, in their communities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, guys.
Anyone else wishing to speak from the public? All right, then back to the board. I have lights on Trustee West.
I just wanted to thank you for sharing, and I think it's important not only to educate our students, but I think our parents need to be educated as well. I know some of the human trafficking that's being done in the schools works with the students, but they also have a component that works with the parents as well, because sometimes our parents don't understand what's going on.
And Trustee Jimenez?
I was just wondering if Hart would be willing to and able to present at our next Inter-High Council meeting. Our Inter-High Council is a district-wide leadership reunion of our top ASB officers at all of the MCS high schools, the 7 comprehensive. If so, our next one is March 5th at Enoch's Library from 5:30 to 6:30. We could extend it to 7. I have my contact info on a little piece of paper if you could come up here, please. Thank you.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. That's a great idea because there's so many student leaders at that. So, Trustee Walker.
I don't know if it's a question as much as I'll come back with it, only because we're in Olympics mode, so I've been watching the Olympics, and there's actually a relationship here, what you were just talking about with devices and students using them, and I think I brought this up a couple months ago at a different meeting, but Katie Quirk is going to do a series for National Geographic about tech addiction and getting it out of the hands of some of children, and I could not agree more with that philosophy because I can't pry it out of my children's hands to a certain degree, and I think less tech has actually got some advantages versus it being everywhere. But I'll be interested in seeing what her report is, because it goes to some of what you were talking about and what you guys were talking about, and it's supposed to be a produced series. I don't know when it is, but it was the first thing I thought about when she mentioned that was, how do we get that shut off so it's not as prevalent, especially with the younger ones, because we don't always know what's going on the phones. Even if we can get them away, sometimes I have to get a thumbprint to get her to open it, and it's a problem.
Thank you. Any more comments or questions from the board? All right. This was an information item only. So that unless our superintendent, would you like to make any? Do we have any closing remarks on that? No.
No, I just appreciate our students coming forward in a leadership role, and appreciate what you do for the other students in our district.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Then this takes us on to item the new item B5, which is report on projected enrollment for fall 2018. And I turn the matter over to Superintendent Ridquist, and who I believe is going to introduce Mr. Waltersdorf.
Mr. Zerley is going to introduce Mr. Waltersdorf and introduce this item.
Thank you, President Newman. Each January, the first and most important projection that comes out of business services is the enrollment projection for the next fiscal year. And it's needed this early, and it's the most important because it is the foundation for both our revenue and staffing projections that are needed, a key component of budget development. And so with that said, I will turn it over to Dwayne Wolterstorff to go into detail our enrollment projection for 18-19.
Good evening, President Newman, trustees, interim superintendent Mr. Ridquist and the cabinet. I'm Dwayne Wolterstorff, interim senior director of business services. Tonight I am presenting the report on projected enrollment for the fall of 2018. As I oftentimes call it, it's a crystal ball. Hopefully we get it fairly accurate. Enrollment projections are based on a number of factors like historic movement from grades to grade, residential development in the area, attrition rates, school program modifications, unemployment rates, birth rates, and also school principal input. Oftentimes the school principals do a lot of work of really canvassing their neighborhoods and feeder schools for information on what's going to happen in the next year. There is some residential activity happening in our area, but most of it's just infill projects. We don't have any big projects that are coming up soon. There are some on the horizon, but those these infill projects aren't expected to be big influxes of students for us at this time. Unemployment rates are down from a year ago. That's good. Means our population's a little more stable versus times when the unemployment rate is really high. People tend to flee to areas where they can find employment. Birth rates in Stanislaus County have been declining since 2007. In 2013, there was just a little bit of an upward movement, and those 2013 babies are the ones that are going to be our kindergartners this coming fall. So taking all of that into consideration, and as Tim mentioned, we do this for budget reasons, staffing reasons, and facility needs to determine you know, what are these projections, what effect is it going to have on our district. And with that, doing that study, we have found that at the elementary level, the K-6 level, is that we're going to have a decrease of enrollment of 175 students. That the reason those numbers are coming out that way is because the sixth graders that are going to be leaving is a much bigger body of students than what we're projecting as the kinders coming in. And so therefore the decline there. You get to the junior high level, and we're projecting an increase of 77 students. And that is because the incoming sixth graders are in larger numbers than the exiting eighth graders. And then ninth grade through 12th, we're projecting an increase of 74 students. So not a lot of change, almost kind of status quo, with some of the like Sylvan and Empire, they have a smaller group of eighth graders than in the past, versus our eighth graders were up, you know, just a little bit. So it kind of comes together so that we have a little bit of an increase. Now all these numbers that we're talking about is only for regular education. It is not for special ed. We don't do any projections of special ed in any of these numbers. So the overall, when you combine all the K through 12, we are looking at a decrease of 24 students, and so we'll have a projected enrollment of 28,131 students. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Walterstorff. Are there questions from the board? Trustee Brown.
Yes, I noticed that there are several schools that have higher numbers of decline, and I'm just curious if there's any possibility of any boundary alignments or realignments that might balance any of this out. For instance, Robb Road losing 22 students, decreasing below the 400 mark. Could they take some overload off of any of the neighboring schools? Do we look at that with these projections?
We don't look about overloading students at this time. We wait until the students actually arrive at the school sites in the fall, and we start tracking at that point, you know, how many students are there by grade level, and then start looking at do we need to overload students to other sites if the class sizes get too large. So that's when the decision on overloading is made.
Trustee Marks?
So in looking at these, do we have some schools that have students coming in from outside our district, like Ceres or Ripon or other areas to come to maybe the IB program or some specific programs that we have?
Yes, more at the high school level.
Right.
We kind of see that in that if you start looking at the numbers, if you go back and look at trends overall, you look at the number of 8th graders, and when I look at the number of 8th graders across all the 8 elementaries that feed into our high schools, that number in total is actually less than the amount of students that show up the following year. So from that, it tells us, number one is that we're probably getting students from private schools or charter schools that want to now come to our high schools. But I also know we are also attracting students from other districts. I know for a fact of, you know, that can happen at Grigori, where we're the program that they have that's really good is attracting students from Ripon and Manteca and things like that. But then also we have others that are attracting students from Ceres, and I've even talked to some parents that are bringing their kids from Turlock. So, so yes, that happens at the high school level, not so much at the other levels.
Yeah, more mobile sometimes in high school. That's great. I'm glad that we have that, and I just think about when I think about as a parent, where do I want to send my students? And I know for me personally, Modesto High with the IB program was really important in having my students go there. And so I mean, if I know enrollment has dropped off in about since 2010, 9 maybe, we dropped off about 6,000 students. So we were up at 36,000 students at that time. And so we've never recovered that. And so even though our city has recovered in many ways, I was kind of, in my mind, I'm wondering where did those students go that may have moved back to our area or have, are there other programs outside our district that are attracting students that we could implement in our own district to maybe get some of those students to come back? Because I know some families, I don't know them now, but I have heard about them that have, you know, said that their address is in another area, so their students could go to that school or that school district rather than saying their actual address. They'll give an aunt or somebody's. So I know that was pretty prevalent in the past. I don't know how much it is now, but that was a thing that I actually, anyway, parents would tell me that. So, So I'm just wondering, I know as we look at this, we've leveled out and at least we're not really losing students. So I know each year we lost quite a number every year and it was hitting our budget pretty severely. So I'm pleased to see that we're leveling out and that we're actually have students that are, that we have programs that are attracting students from outside our district. So I just like to see us do that more. So when I look at enrollment, that's what I think. I think, how can we make our district somewhere where parents outside our district want to be here? Or even parents that are in our district that have had their kids go to another place. So that's just my thought, but I appreciate you sharing the demographics and what's happening really with our students. And numbers, actually, not demographics.
All right, Trustee Walker?
I move quick. I'll piggyback off of Trustee Marks right quick because she gave me an idea. Only because you mentioned sort of parents coming into the high schools. Maybe this is where you sort of take these, for lack of a better term, these highlighted programs at each site where you have IB at Modesto High and you have, I don't know which program you're talking about at Grigori, but I would think the audio video technology thing they do over there is great. Forensic biology at Enox. You know, what are you guys doing over at Johansson? I know they have the culinary thing, but so we lift those programs up and sort of highlight them at each site. It just gave me an idea when you were talking. I was going to say thank you for the comment on the birth rates because it actually stuck because I had somebody send me an article about 3 or 4 weeks ago about it being a national trend in the sense that it's not just us, but nationally we aren't having as many babies as we used to. And it's interesting that trend comes all the way back to here, which sort of gives you that data point that says, okay, that passes the smell test twice. And that it's not just us, but it's a national trend. And another reason to highlight the high schools and bring people in, because I do think that those programs like the forensic biology, IB, and so forth can be highlighted to get folks involved, and especially when you look at the career tech ed side. And those vocational skills that get folks job ready is something I'd like to see us highlight a whole lot.
All right. Are there any more comments or questions from the board? And then we'll go to the audience. All right. Thank you, Mr. Alterstorp. Are there any questions or comments from the audience? All right. Don't see anybody moving to get up. All right. Back to the board for comment. Is there anyone? I just want to say thank you to our staff for this comprehensive report. I use this as an example when I talk to my high school students about human geography, because what we're doing here is kind of what they need to, the skills they're learning. So actually what they're learning in that class is somewhat applicable here. Because we're looking at statistics and trying to plan policy and plan for it based on that. So this is what we're doing in our own district is kind of what we're trying to teach in that human geography course. And so I explain this to my own students and other ones that are trapped in my car and have to listen to me. So so they get the little lecture on this. I think it's just really important as we look at each of our high schools. I also want to point out a comment in the report which said that Davis High School is at capacity. I know that when I first got on this board 6 years ago, we were worried about the enrollment and how many students were there, and doing some, improving and investing in the school, and then also with some boundary realignments. That has leveled out some numbers. We have Beyer still small, but that's a demographic anomaly. As we've had explained before, there's just been a low birth rate in that area. And so, as you know, we've just got amazing programs at all of our schools, and kudos to our staff that goes out for those 8th grade information nights. Those are impressive. It makes you want to go back to high school when you go and attend those. So we really, as I just want to encourage the public to know our schools, know your students, and we work hard to make sure there's a program out there for them. So are there any other questions? We'll move on to, this was just a report. We'll move on to the new item B6, which is report on the governor's 2018-2019 budget proposal. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Rudquist.
And Mr. Zerly will present this budget report.
Thank you again. The second piece in budget development is awaiting the governor's release each January for the state budget. And really the component there that we're interested in is the piece of the state budget that is allocated for education. And so we're here tonight to talk about what the governor has proposed. It is a proposal currently with the information that is known at this point in time. And it's also gathered with information from school services and capital advisors' budget presentations. We went to both this year, cabinet, and then the bargaining units went to Sacramento and listened to the school services presentation, and then other financial staff went and heard from capital advisors. So this presentation is a combination of both of those presentations regarding the governor's proposals for 2018-2019. We're going to talk about the impact of the governor's proposal on the local control funding formula, and then the challenges ahead, and then what is going on to what has to happen to enact the state budget and also the district budget. So we were very pleased this January, probably a little different than last January, in that this budget proposes some increased funding for education and full implementation of the local control funding formula. This is 2 years ahead of the governor's original plan to have the local control funding formula fully implemented by the year 2020, 2021. So this year, the gap, you've probably heard about the gap. In the past, since the implementation of the local control funding formula, there's been this gap between the floor and the ceiling. And each year we get a percentage of that gap funded. So the floor gets closer to the ceiling each year. Now it is to be fully implemented, so there will be no more gap. If this budget proposal moves forward and gets enacted, there will be no more gap for us each year to consider. There is a 2.51% COLA increase to our base grant targets. And again, anytime we get a COLA added, that just raises the ceiling. So the ceiling goes up by 2.51%. That makes the gap a little larger, but the governor is proposing to fully close that gap. So the 2.51% just now raises the ceiling a little bit higher. For next year, it's on average about $550 per ADA, or roughly a 5.8% increase. Individual district results vary because each district has a different unduplicated pupil percentage. And so you could have a neighbor that receives more or receives less, depending on the type of the student that district serves. I just want to make a point here on that last bullet. Going back to first interim, we presented with first interim a multi-year projection. So part of that multi-year projection had a projection for 2018-19. It's not as if we didn't have something in there for growth. So the $550 per ADA is not totally new to us. In fact, it only increases our projection by about $3.2 million. So there was some projection in there for next year to close the gap. It just wasn't 100%. At that point in time in December, we did not have an idea that the governor would be proposing to close the gap by 100%. There is one-time funding in this proposal that we did not have in the December multi-year projection, and so that adds about $8.5 million to our revenue projection that we did not have in our initial multi-year projection, because at that point in time, that was not anticipated. And so those are new. And so when you see the second interim, and we'll talk about that in a slide coming up, the multi-year projection will look a little different than what we showed you just this past December. So our initial thoughts, again, we're very pleased. We're very pleased with this governor's proposal. Going into last year, probably a year ago, you probably heard that the state of California had some volatile revenue projections. And as is the case with the state of California, we're highly dependent on the 1% of wage earners. And so depending on how well they are doing, whether that's in the stock market or capital gains, the revenue allocated to California is very volatile. It's based on a lot of economic factors. A year ago, it looked a lot different than it does today. So there is much stronger growth for 18-19 than probably what you were presented and what we thought a year ago, and even 6 months ago. This is Governor Brown's last term as governor, depending on which term you count. But it has been historic, and I think we all have to admit that. It's his final budget. Depending on what your political party preference is, this governor, his second time around, has been remarkably fiscally conservative, and so very much different than predecessor from previous governments and previous administrations. And this governor has a lasting, his goal was to get the local control funding formula to revise school funding reform, and he will do that his last term. It will be fully funded. The governor exits it's interesting that this governor exits with a surplus and healthy reserves, and we'll talk about reserve limits on what school districts are facing, but the state of California has a very healthy reserve, what they term a rainy day fund. The governor actually said this, let's not blow it now. So the goals of the local control funding formula, just to kind of review, the original goal was that no agency was going to receive less funding than they had in 2012-2013. That was the base year. That was the first year of implementation. And so no district would receive less funding. Purchasing power was to be restored to pre-recession levels. Equalization, core funding, same for all. That's the base funding, not the supplemental and concentration, but the base grant funding for each grade level of pupil. That's the same funding formula for every school district. And obviously, more services for higher needs. So the higher needs student receives more dollars, and with that, the anticipation of more services. As I previously mentioned, it was supposed to be fully implemented in 2020-21, which now occurs in the next budget year, 2018-2019. So we start with the base grants. This is just for your reference. So each grade gets a base grant. And you're going to hear a lot of this going forward about base grants, because now that we're going to be fully funded, the only way to get new dollars or new revenues is to increase the base grant. That's going to be a push moving forward. You're going to hear that a lot after this fiscal year. So to start, each grade span gets a base grant, and it is adjusted by the COLA. This year, it's anticipated to be 2.51%, and so then you can see the adjusted base grants. There's add-ons depending on the grade level of the student. So for each kindergarten through third grade student, we get an add-on, a grade span adjustment to reduce class sizes. And so you can see we get an additional $767 per pupil. And then for 9-12, it is for career technical education coursework. There's an additional added to the base grant there. And then we have the supplemental and concentration grants. And again, you can see how much we're granted above for the type of students we serve, whether they're, and it's a combination of our English learner population, free and reduced lunch, and foster youth. That generates what is called an unduplicated pupil percentage. And so you can see additional funds that we receive for each student above a certain percentage number. This is why each district could have different funding levels depending on the type of student that they serve. And it's very apparent just in our two districts. We have a disparity in our unduplicated pupil percentage population for our K-8 students versus our 9-12 students. So the elementary district and the formula for the elementary receives much more dollars in the form of supplemental and concentration because we have a much higher unduplicated pupil percentage in the students we serve. And that truly was the intent of this governor and the local control funding formula. So what's happened over time? And I love this graph. Going back, you can see in 2012, 2013, that was the first year of the local control funding formula. And you can see where we were before that. Now, this is Proposition 98 funding. This is not our funding. Proposition 98 is the dollars in the state budget that are allocated for education purposes. And you can see where we were in 08-09 to 2011-12. We faced many years of what was termed as deficits. So what probably should be shown on this graph is what we were entitled to versus what we were funded, because if you would see what we were entitled to, the bar would be much higher than what we were actually funded in those years. That created, the deficit created what was called a maintenance factor. And so because Proposition 98 is statutory, it's enacted by the voters, whatever the formula says we are to receive, we are entitled to receive. Now, the legislature can decide not to fund that. We don't have enough dollars to fund that, and it creates deficits. And so what happened was we went through a period of time where we weren't getting the dollars we were eligible for. It created this maintenance factor, which now, beginning in 13-14, is starting to be paid back. And you can see the steep incline of 13-14 to 2018-19. That maintenance factor, or dollars that they owed us, the state owed us from the years of deficit, are now being paid back as the economy got better. This is kind of interesting. Just wanted to, again, the volatility of the state of California in prior administrations. You can see balanced budgets and then what happened following balanced budgets. And again, the revenue in California is volatile. It comes many cases one time and not ongoing because of how it's gathered through personal income tax. And so there have been years in the past where we thought we were doing well, and then all of a sudden it gets turned upside down for things out of our control. So this is, we're running a pretty good period right now, and there's some people that think that the red lines are going to come back in our immediate future, as is evidenced by this particular chart. If you look at the blue or purplish line, that's the 2017 Budget Act, and then there is what's the LAO is the Legislative Analyst Office. It is a nonpartisan office that advises the state legislature on budget-related issues. And so you can see that what the Legislative Analyst Office projects in the red line, and if they did actually two projections for the legislature to consider, one which kept the growth path intact, and then one where they assumed another recession that would begin sometime during the 18-19 fiscal year. So this is information that is shared with the state legislature for them to consider now that they have the governor's proposal, and then what to do moving forward to actually approve a budget for 18-19. I just find this kind of interesting in that you know what could happen if we go back to those years of deficits in the state of California. Again, just showing this as a comparison, going back to first interim, that would be the blue line when we looked at our multi-year projections, and then now when we bring you the second interim in March with the newest release of what the governor is proposing, that would be the top line now for our multi-year projection. And you can see that we get to the same point in the year 2020, 21. It's a steeper path now with the most current governor's proposal, which means there's more dollars in the immediate years of 18-19 and 19-20 than what we had projected for those in our original multi-year projection. This is a challenge for us, and it brings in our credibility a little bit because we're only able to project based on the information we have at that point in time. So in December, our information was based on the blue line. 1 month later, you can see how it's changed, and now we have a whole different projection going into 18-19. This issue, I'm sure many people are getting tired of hearing about it, but this is an issue, and this is not going away. And you can see where our pension costs are for our employees. CalPERS is the green portion of the bar, and CalSTRS is the blue portion of the bar. Again, going back to 2013-14, where we were versus where we project to be in 2018-19. Now these are statewide. These aren't our dollars because these are in billions of dollars. But it would be similar if we put our chart up there for our expenses. It would look very similar to this. And why is this important? Because 18-19, after 18-19, we're looking at very small revenue increases. This year it was a 2.51% COLA. So we can probably look at something around that range in the future, 19-20, 2020-21. It's going to be in the 2 to 3% range. So our revenue is going to, the base grants are going to go up by in the 2 to 3% range. That's the current projections. And you can see these are our built-in costs. These are just one of our built-in costs and how they continue to rise. This is out of our control. This is no fault of our employees. It's no fault of us. This is an unfunded mandate for us. And you can see, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, how our costs, now that we're fully funded, are going to be outpacing what our projected revenue growth is for the future years. And this is an example of that. And this is a a per ADA growth in revenues and expenses. So if you look at our current year, 2017-18, we experienced about, again, on average, about a $235 growth in our revenue per the local control funding formula. And then if you look at the right next to that, those are our built-in costs. So, and then the two on the bottom is STRS increase and PERS increase. Those are built in. And then we do have automatic step and column increases for our employees. And then the dotted line, which remains, it's an unknown, is the special education contribution. And so when you look at an estimate for how our per ADA growth and expenses are for this year, it exceeds what the revenue that we received. Now 18-19, which appears to be a good year for us, our growth in revenues are going to outpace our growth in expenses. That's a good year. But then go to 19-20 and 20-21, again, going back to now that we're fully funded, the expectation is just a small percentage increase on the revenue side. For 19-20, we're looking at about $236 per pupil, and then 2020, 2021, $281. But then compare that to what our could be expected cost increases are, $441 or $367. So we're coming into years or projection years that unless the base grant increases at much higher than just COLA projections, our costs are going to outpace our revenues in our projection years. What's not in the education budget, again, and I talked about it, increasing the local control funding formula base grants to reach the funding level of what could be the top 10 states. That's going to be a priority. And we are part of a coalition. Modesto City School is part of a coalition to bring interest to this, bring this attention to the state legislatures on why we need to have our base grant funding increased, just to keep pace with what the cost increases are, which are the growing local obligations for our retirement. And it is an unfunded liability. Home to school transportation programs. The funding we receive for home to school transportation is an add-on. It does not receive any increases. It's not subject to even the COLA increase. So it has not changed during the course of the local control funding formula. And then obviously there's going to be a push to equalize AB 602 base rate fundings for special education. Again, I think when you think about California, it's the 6th largest economy in the world. But amongst our peers in the United States, we rank 45th in the percentage of taxable income spent on education, 41st in per pupil spending, 45th in pupil teacher ratios, and 48th in pupil staff ratios. So there's going to be a push, I believe, in the immediate future to infuse new dollars for base grant purposes in order for us to do better in each one of these percentages. So the governor has released his proposal, which we presented to you today. That's the basis for us now to put into our budget assumptions and move forward with budget development. Sometime in the early spring, budget subcommittees are formed. They will examine the governor's and legislative proposals with input from the Legislative Analyst's Office. And then the waiting period now is for the May revise. So once all of us pay our taxes, file our tax returns, and see how the state is doing on actual collections versus what they project to collect, the May revise could change this up or down depending on what happens. The state has to enact a budget by July 1. We have to enact a budget by June 30th. So those will be the next steps in the process.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Zierli, for that thorough report. Are there any questions from the board? All right. Trustee Marks and Trustee Walker were in at the same time. How about Trustee Marks first?
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Zerly. That was really helpful to see it all on, I like the little graph things, and to get a greater understanding of where the governor's at. And I appreciate the fact that he's conservative, and then he boosts up stuff if there's extra money when he does his May revise, so on the actual budget in June. I have a question on the smaller class sizes. I know that there's a 10.4% increase for smaller average class sizes. And do you know what the minimum is for that? I just wasn't sure if I don't know if it's under 24 or.
To be eligible to receive the add-on, once fully funded, districts had to be at 24-1. So
Okay.
that's an average.
Right.
And it's not a district average, it's a per site average. So if one site doesn't meet that, it jeopardizes the funding for the whole district.
Oh my
Now,
goodness.
from 13-14 to now, each year that the gap had been closed by a certain percentage, districts that weren't already at 24-1 had to make the same percentage improvement.
Okay.
So, and then you have to be 100% by the time they're fully funded, or at 24-1, which would be next year. And we are already at that,
Okay.
or below that.
Okay. That's good to know. So we got that little extra bump, 700 and, I can't quite read it, $67 per student. So that's helpful. And we don't know if that's going to continue on. My concern is that, because sometimes the governor or the legislature does this and they say, oh, we'll do this for you. And then later, like 10 years, or well, 5 years, whatever, anyway, oh, by the way, we're not going to fund that anymore. And then you're scrambling to try to figure out how we're going to pay for that and moving students around and all the implications of that. So I'm pleased that we're receiving it, at least for now. So that's good.
Trustee Walker.
Okay, this is like my favorite report ever so far. Only because the way you do your reports is really good, and I've liked them from the beginning. But for somebody who's sort of followed these things, this was fantastic. Even before I saw words I use all the time, unfunded mandate, yay. I heard it from somebody besides me. Proposition 98. I think one of the questions I'll just sort of confirm is that that's also meant to be a floor, in the sense that it gets perceived that, okay, we did our Prop 98 number. But in reality, if you hit your Prop 98 number, what you've really done is we held the floor up.
That is correct. It establishes a minimum funding level. And for many years, we weren't even able to obtain the minimum funding level, so correct.
And then we'll jump over to 11. I appreciate the part where you had the two LAO estimates. And I think what's interesting there, if anybody's ever sat in an LAO briefing, and Trustee Marks mentioned the governor sort of, he'll hedge back. And so he'll pull his punches on the budget. LAO tends to be a bit closer to actual reality when the rubber hits the road. And I think that's interesting to see both their projections, because in reality it probably falls in the middle somewhere, right?
Correct.
I'm going to run from the purrs and stirs because they scare me, and we'll come back to that. I appreciate you answering my question on the slide that was difficult to understand. And I think that was 14 with all the colored bars. And I think that makes a lot more sense now that you walk through that what really happens is you see this big jump up because they gave us this bump right now. And then it falls back down. And so the subsequent years, all we're looking at in those 19, 20, 2021 numbers is the COLA.
Correct.
All right. And then number 16, we should put in front of every budget presentation we ever do. I don't realize how many people actually realize that we are in that, and this goes back to the 80s, and I'm not clear that I want to change why it happened in the 80s, because if we go back to Prop 13, people will start getting guns out. But when they put Prop 13 in place, California dropped. These aren't new numbers. We've been 40th and 45th for 25, 30 years now. And I think I appreciate that part of the report, because it's extremely important for people to understand that we're not even close to what we should be doing in education funding. And I think the part that disturbed me most sort of the last 2 weeks as I've watched this roll out is as soon as they went to this fully funding of LCFF, within a day or so, the first thing coming out of CDE and the State Board of Education was a barking point. What are they doing with all the money? We've given them everything they need. Why aren't they doing more with the money, and I think that's disingenuous. The thing I saw today that sort of integrates both ed services in your department, and I mentioned this maybe last month or the month before when we were talking about the dashboard and them pushing those requirements down. They've now turned right back around within 2 weeks, and if I'm not mistaken, they've now got another group out working to rework LCAP, which appears to be heading directly what we were talking about, where it lines up pushing the accountability of what we're doing with the LCAP, with what we're doing with the funding, and sort of pushing it down on us to make us do the work. That's a pretty good perception of what they're talking about, isn't it?
You're correct. I was in a webinar today and it exactly hit that point.
Okay, because then I think the other thing that sort of made me nervous is I saw today, and here's I guess what I would ask all of us to be watching, is that the perception in Sacramento by the legislatures, and I've heard them say this to me, you've got all the money in the world you need. And now you just gave us a bunch more, and I saw that they're going to introduce a bill coming up later next week or the week after that's now going to say we're going to expand the TK pre-K program for free. There's nothing free, right? So they're going to push those costs down on us. I appreciate the report, but I think it's important to note that there was good news in here. And I think the long-term perspective that we aren't adequately funded and that we do need to get to that top 10%, and how we communicate that to the public and everybody involved, that we just didn't hit the rainbow. And now there's money to throw all over the place because, in all honesty, we really aren't adequately funded or even close. And your presentation highlights that very well, and I appreciate it.
Are there any more questions for Mr. Zierli? All right, are there any questions or comments from the audience? All right, seeing none, it'll come back to the board for comment. This is report only. Thank you for your report. I think it's really important for us to note, particularly slides 14 and 13, that costs outpace revenues in the coming years. So we need to be prudent with regard to that with this budget proposal. That takes us on to items B7, the approval of the budget assumptions for initial development of the 2018-2019 budget.
Thank you. So the third piece of this is taking the information from the enrollment projection, the governor's proposal projections, and putting that into our budget assumptions so staff can begin to build the budget. No matter what the state does, we have to have a budget approved by June 30th. And so in many years in the past, they've gone well into the summer. We don't see that as being the case this year, but no matter what they do, we have to have a budget to you, approved by you, by June 30th for 18-19. So the information that was just presented to you, we're now putting into our budget assumptions so staff can begin preparing that, and we just need your approval for those assumptions to begin budget development.
Are there any questions for Mr. Zierli? All right, Trustee Walker.
All right, I like these because they're related to each other. They're like cousins. The other question I had asked earlier in the week and you answered for me was the impact of the reserve cap, and you had told me earlier today that that won't kick into effect this year. There really isn't sort of a top or bottom on that. Our general assumption here is we're doing 3%. I think you told me that going forward, once this thing kicks in, they'll give us 10% reserves we can put away?
Yes, correct. Proposition 2 has been revised by Senate Bill 751. One of the changes was that the cap applies to a combined assigned or unassigned ending balance in the general fund. Originally with Proposition 2, it said it applies to a combined assigned and unassigned balance. So with the revisions, it's or the board has the ability to assign to assign balances in the ending fund balance. That's one way that we can manage that. But it does put a cap of 10% on the general fund and special reserve fund, which is Fund 17. So the cap is 10%, but it is now assigned or unassigned instead of assigned and unassigned. That's a major change, as well as the 10% cap. But we're being advised, and the governor has even stated this, that for 18-19, there's four things have to be met, 4 conditions have to be met. There'll be 3 of the 4, but the condition surrounding Proposition 98 will not be met for 18-19. So this cap will not be implemented in the coming fiscal year.
So even with the modifications they've made in the legislation, we still have to hit these trigger points to get there, right?
Yes, there's 4 trigger points. Yes.
Theoretically, we could still stash that in a place and call it something else, though, right? In the sense that we can still set money aside and say, hey, we can't do this right now because we haven't hit our triggers, but we could set up our own rainy day fund that would get us to where we need to be
Yes,
with a
that
little
would
bit
be
of
an
cushion.
assignment. Yes, that would be an assignment by the board when we go through the budget process.
I'll save my other questions for the board when we come back because I think I'd like to see what their position is on some of these ideas.
Trustee Marks.
Yeah, I just have a question on generally in this report or for the budget assumptions. Is it possible to plug in actual numbers into the percentages, like where we have the expenditures on the PERS and STIRS? Can we, see what 16.28% or 1.87% or over? So when we put, I know the percentages, and I know we have a we know how many employees we have per year. We know what the percentage should calculate out to be. So is it possible to put that in these expenditures? So when we look at the state revenue and how much $146 per student is or $48 per student is, can we plug those numbers into this report so that we as a board know how that actually is going to affect our, when we approve the budget? Or is it too difficult, or doesn't work that way? It seems like, and many years ago, that we used to do it that way, but now we've added STIRS and PERS, and that didn't used to be on this. So I don't know if that's not a calculation that we can actually put in a report.
Yeah, it's definitely a calculation we can put in, but it is a projection, and it is a projection at a given point in time.
Right, yeah.
So what's going to happen now is we're going to work on with human resources. We're going to work on staffing formulas to establish our staffing needs for next year, which will generate a dollar based on these percentages and the number of employees that we are projecting. But we can use what we currently have right now, our current staff that we have, which you will see in the multi-year projection come second interim. And using these higher percentages, you will see what our projections are for STIRS and PERS for 18-19. Just know it's a projection based on our current staffing formulas and people we have right now. And we can provide that sooner than second interim if the board wishes, but that would be the next time. And we can do that in the future. In future updates like this, we can certainly do that.
Because it's just helpful to get a better knowledge of where the money's going and how it's being spent, and just kind of a big picture idea of here's how much we have. And then when we do the last report that you did, the governor, you could see the STIRS and PERS, and then how it's affecting, how the graph is moving up, and then for us to see where's our funding level for us, and then where's STIRS and PERS, how's it's being taken out of that. Just like we used to do the funding gap, we used to have the little money bag that moved. And so, but to be able to see that for us as board members, to be able to get a better knowledge and understanding how the budget works for future decisions, and just to be able to have a working knowledge of it. So I thank you that it's a possibility. I'm not saying you have to do it for the next meeting, but at least to see if that's something that is possible, maybe for a future one. I don't know if it's really difficult to make it work, but I would appreciate it. So it just helps me. I like to see the numbers all in one place and then be able to say, oh, okay, so this is affecting, what are our other expenditures that we're doing in, all the itemized things that we've already set aside and said, this is how much we want to set aside is $2 million for emergency facility maintenance. Well, how's our STRS and PERS affecting that? How's our salary and benefits affecting that? So that's just my way of thinking.
Absolutely.
Okay,
We'll
thank you.
get you that.
I had a question regarding at one time we had money set aside for Burbank, and that's what we did, the cafeteria project. We had we'd put some money aside, I think it was 5-6 million for that, and we had earmarked it for Burbank and Wilson. Burbank cost more than we anticipated, so Wilson is not on the, it fell off the list. So I want to put it back. I think that was a wise decision for us to put the 5 million, I think it was 5 or 6 million that we put in there, and I'd like to see that as a budget assumption. It's not on this sheet. Does that mean it's not in the works right now? Because I know that fund was depleted with Burbank. Am I right?
You are correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's not part of our assumption at this point to have any money set aside for Wilson at this time. Is that where we're at?
That is correct.
Okay. So that would be something, if as we're going through this, we could talk about. Yeah, I would like to see us put. We had tentatively planned for an improvement project there because it's desperately needed, and we had already put it as a priority. And then it Burbank was the first priority because it was more acute, but I'd like to see it renewed.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what that number should be. When we were working with Terry, she kind of winced when I threw out a number. So I'd like to see that number. I'd like to see that on there as a line item, but I don't want to. I'm not sure what that number should be. What is a reasonable number? I would say at least 2 million. But that won't get the project done. So, I think we estimated it to be, I don't remember what the estimate was at this point. Is anybody else? Yeah. But we need to, we had it as a pledge to that school, to that community. And I want to see, I don't want to just see it go away. So I'd really like to have a line item on Wilson.
Okay.
With upwards of 2 million, and so that would be my proposal for an assumption. Does anybody else have an idea on that, or do you recall, is Mr. Walterstorff still here?
No, he's left.
Okay, because we had that. He might know that number.
Well, I'll research it and we can follow up with the board.
Yeah.
On a specific dollar amount.
Right, but if we could put, while we're doing the assumptions right now, would it be appropriate to put it as a line item and then fill in an exact number? But at this point, I want to say at least upwards of 2 million.
Now would be the time to do it. Yes, it would be appropriate now.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yes.
Then I'm going to throw that one out there. Are there any more questions? Because we got to go to the audience. All right. Are there any questions from the audience? All right, seeing none. Then we'll come back to the board for maybe more comment on any other assumptions we want to have included here. And Trustee Walker.
All right, see, that's a good thing about having spent time with Trustee Marks. We ended up in the same place, sort of. She said it differently. I think what I'd like to see, if the rest of the board would like to see it, and I don't know how possible it is within the framework, what would a budget look like, and how close could we get taking everything, because this is everything on the table. We're not getting any more other than a menial 2% here and there. Could we create a budget that does not have us deficit spending with a 10% reserve and the ability to understand when we add on, how did it affect our deficit spending? Because I think if we continue to deficit spend at the rate we're doing, giving the upcoming PERS and STRS that are going to hit us pretty hard, mixed in with our facilities needs, that if we don't have the ability to see at a very high level, this decision impacts us here, that would be a framework that would be understandable both to us and the public. And I think it would also allow us to sort of take a step back when we look at the LCFF, which is the bulk of our money. Get back to meetings I attended, but I sat down with Mr. Zierli and his staff 2 weeks ago to talk about issues not related to LCFF. That then you could identify these large costs that are eating versus one-time costs that don't eat relative to deficit spending, because there's a lot of wheels turning here, and 400 million is a lot of money. But a way to look at a budget, not deficit spending, 10% in reserves, and a way to identify choices that are eating, Pac-Man style eating on, somebody asked a question once back during labor negotiations. What's the difference between a one-time and an ongoing expenditure? You pay for it once, you own it, you're making payments forever, it's ongoing. What are those ongoing costs, and where, because at some point we're going to have to cut. I don't see any way to get out past this in 19, 20, 2021, sort of 22, when these PERS and STIRS numbers start climbing up, inflation if we're still in a growth environment, funding is rolling at 2%, which won't even cover the PERS and STIRS. We're talking about building, we're talking about floating bonds, we're talking about a lot of, I think that would help if, and I'll quiet because I can do too much, but that sort of concept applied coming after second interim, going towards what we're going to do next year, that would allow us to understand and would allow us to present a easier to understand picture to the public on where we're at, deficit to savings to rainy day to ongoing expenses versus one time.
Okay, so Trustee Walker, are you suggesting that so we were looking at assumptions at this point. I proposed one that we include a money for Wilson. We put that back on the line item because we had it there once and we ate all the money doing Burbank, which is great. I mean, I'm pleased that we did what we did, but it just cost more than we thought it would. Are you proposing that we have an assumption of a 10% reserve? Or are you just proposing, like, we look into that? Or
What would that look like? Because at some point we need more than 3% in the rainy day fund. I think the idea that, that's why I like your presentation so much, Mrs. Zierli, because it goes to school services. And one of the things they always talk about when you do those classes and those presentations is how many days of salary will that reserve pay for? 3% is going to get us through about a week if we cut a vacation day in the middle of that. It isn't going to cover it, and I don't think we end up at that point where we don't pay anybody but for a week, but it's a good way to see that number. And having something set aside for that emergency, and then still being able to plan things like fixing school sites that we need to fix. But using current assumptions, going out, how do we get to a point where we're not deficit spending? I think if we continue to deficit spend going out with long-term liabilities, whether it be pension, whether it be upcoming bonds, whatever that case may be, we're not getting any more pie after this, outside of the 2.5% COLA that they're going to give us. And I'd like to be able to, I think it would be good for all of us to be able to see if we go do the school repair you're talking about, and we finish Burbank, and we do these other things, how does that affect the deficit spending? And I think what you're talking about is a one-time cost, which is much easier to swallow in my mind. If there's something that you pay for once and you own, that's easier to chew on versus telling me that we're going to buy something that's going to continue to eat forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. The example there in my mind is technology that's very expensive and doesn't stop eating and doesn't stop with maintenance and has an HR component. It goes on and on. If that's sort of an example of where I would differentiate, that makes sense. It's much easier to talk me into a one-time than an ongoing, because we have a lot of ongoing things we've done. And I think part of that is attributable to what the legislature's done, because they keep giving us this one-time money over and over again. Then the perception becomes, we're always going to get one-time money. We can keep going until it stops. And then all of a sudden it stops, and you go, oh, crap, now what do we do? I'd like to know that before we get there.
Trustee Marks.
So listening to the conversation, I'm in agreement about Wilson and setting aside the funding that we had already promised to do at Wilson and then took it away or it moved somewhere else or got spent because some facility costs escalated. And then the other one is the reserve. I agree with you as a plan to set aside money. I couldn't say that this is the right year to do it, but I could see making a graduated plan to hit some mark at some point. And I was thinking maybe up to 5% this year and then seeing if there's enough funding and probably taking some one-time monies and putting it in a reserve. I don't know if that'll work or not, but I'm just looking at it as a possibility. And we used to have, I don't recall what the undesignated and designated reserves were total before whatever the last proposition was before this one that passed that said we couldn't have any more than 3% in there. I don't recall how much it was. I do know it's a fairly significant amount, but right now I'm just am concerned about pressing too hard on what we actually do have without knowing the actual numbers. I don't like making decisions not knowing actual numbers. It's very out there, and I know it. I believe you're going to bring this. I know we have to make this decision tonight whether we're going to do what we're going to, if we modify this at all, that we do that tonight as you build the budget. Then it comes back to us, am I right, in March? Is it March or April that it comes back for the next revision, or because we plan it out for the June budget?
The next time you would see a budget for 18-19 would be in May.
Oh, it's May, okay.
With the local control accountability plan.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that there can't be discussions prior to that point in how we build the budget. But the next time you actually see the numbers for next year will be in May. That would be our preliminary budget that we present.
That's it. Okay.
With the local control accountability plan. Just real quickly on the percentages of the ending fund balance. The 3% is a required minimum for a district our size.
Yep.
So that's always been the case. I mean, we cannot drop below that, or else the state will be here and making decisions for us that we want to make.
Yeah.
At first interim, we had our unassigned was about 12% of our budget. So I just want to put things in perspective for a minute. But the issue back at first interim was the deficit spending then would eat away at that 12% into the projection years and bring it down.
Yeah.
So I mean, just for clarification,
I
just wanted to make that point.
Okay.
Mr. Ridquist would like to talk.
Yes, good.
I think a few of the points I was going to ask about were just mentioned, but I just want to make sure that we're clear on what we need to do tonight. These are assumptions, and we're approving assumptions to be able to have staff begin to build a budget.
Right.
And then, as Mr. Zerly just mentioned, during the months and days ahead, there'll be an analysis, which Mr. Walker was talking about, conversations, et cetera, as we lead to seeing that budget in May and then approving it in June. So I just want to make sure that that tonight staff is able to get the direction that we need to be able to take the steps to actually build the budget based upon the assumptions that you approved tonight.
Trustee Walker?
Again, I think that's a good point because that's what I think I was trying to do. In the sense that after Mr. Zerly and I met 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, time blurs, one of the things he had mentioned is helpful if you all know what we're looking at as a board. You know, what is it that we're after? You know, what are we looking for in a report? And that was mostly what my thought process was here is as you begin to build, that we're all sort of leaning in the same direction. And that's exactly probably stated better than I did, but
So looking at our list here of transfers out to other funds, the auditorium replacement, where is that at? I'm sorry, Mr. Zerly. That auditorium replacement, 60,000. Do we know what school site?
I don't know. Roger, do you know that? That would be at the three. It's for the 3 auditoriums that we have.
Okay. So it's upkeep, maintenance on the 3 auditoriums
Yes.
we have. It's not replacement. It's refurbishment.
Yes.
perhaps is the better word for it. I just was wondering, how are
That
we going to
should be-
replace an
yes.
auditorium for
That should be
$60,000?
changed.
Yeah.
To-
Carpet,
Right.
yeah, that kind of
Right.
stuff. Okay, okay, vehicle replacement. That's our security staff. That's what that is.
That would be what we call white fleet,
Yes.
which would be anything. Obviously, that's not a bus, but
Okay.
yes,
Okay, and then the bus replacement. We have a regular schedule of that. That's the same amount every year.
yes.
The print shop equipment replacement. That's again the same amount every year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the emergency facility maintenance. That's different than what I'm asking for on Wilson. That's we've kept that at $2 million.
Yes.
In light of our history of fire. Should that number be should that number be bigger?
I would not, based on my brief time here, we have enough resources to do what we need to do. Obviously, with the age and condition of some of our facilities, we could do more, but we have enough in this fund to do the emergency repairs that have come up. I'm sure staff would advocate for more, but we have had plenty of dollars in our maintenance account to do what we've needed to do.
Okay. And then the curriculum delivery, that's funded the 1-to-1?
No, this would fund the adoption, the curriculum materials.
Okay.
And then Marla has a detailed schedule as to when the adoptions, what year the adoptions are due, and how much they're anticipated to cost. So this would, even with the one-to-one, this does not cover one-to-one devices.
I thought
This-
that came from another fund, but I just
Yeah,
wanted to
this
see.
would cover the curriculum piece for either the textbook or the one-to-one devices.
Okay, and is this we had set aside at one point an amount of like putting 1 million towards curriculum. It was the same time we put aside the Wilson money, the Burbank money. We said we want to put aside an extra 1 million. And so this 2.5 is in addition to that. Is that 1 million assumption still in the budget, or where did it go? Did we spend it?
No, it has not been spent. The dollars have been transferred to another fund
Okay.
for curriculum purposes, but we have not had an adoption. The dollars
I know, it's been a
are
while.
there, and then this I believe has been increased to account for the other adoptions that are going to be coming up in the time frame in the period. So this 2.5 million represents the total that we need in order to meet what our anticipated requirements are of the future adoptions within the cycle, which is 5 years. Or you're the expert on that, but I mean, yeah, this meets we need this to meet our demand of all of our adoptions within the cycle that we need them.
So the budget, this assumption list doesn't include the amount that we had set aside at one time of an ongoing 1 million, or it was 1 or 2 million. Does anybody remember? Remember?
Yeah.
In curriculum.
$1 million is my understanding.
Yeah, it was 1, I thought.
And some of the money has been used, like in some of the adoption for this year, that was increased. So we have used a small piece of that. But yes, you are correct. There is money in there. That will not cover the many adoptions that we need to catch up with.
Right. I know we are on the precipice of lots of adoptions. The curriculum is going to be, drastically changing. It's great. It's particularly in our junior highs. Okay.
I'm not sure I answered your question, but this is our recommendation, I think, to increase that to a level that will meet the anticipated needs of
Okay.
future adoptions.
And then our curriculum, the annual curriculum investment of 1 million remains. That's also that should be on this list too.
That's part of the 2.5 million.
That's part of it.
Yes, it's been increased.
Okay. That's what you're saying.
We've gone from 1 to 2.5.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay,
Yes.
that's why I wanted to
I
go through this
apologize
list. I was
for-
trying to understand
Yes.
where did this 2.5 come from. All right, Trustee Brown has a question.
So, question that I have, Mr. Zerly, I recall in the past there's been an amount set aside by the board for facilities. The number, earmarked,
Yeah, for specific facilities.
no, this is in general, and I'm thinking there's a dollar amount of $5 million that has been an annual number, and I'm wondering if that's built into these assumptions.
We have, there's a required set aside that we have to set aside. And this additional $2 million, I may bring that to a total of $5 million. I'm not certain on that, but that we have a required set aside. And then this, I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look and see if the board set aside an additional $5 million or if that was the combined amount for maintenance in addition to what we're required to set aside, if that makes sense.
It was separate based on my memory. It was this other earmarked separate amount, but I mean, that's just based on my memory.
Because as I look back at the projects that have been completed over the last couple of years, we've used money that has been set aside by the board, and I've heard continually in those construction meetings how grateful the district is that the board made that move to set aside money for facilities, because we've had a decrease in the amount that we've had received from the state to do that.
And,
So
and
I
many
wanna-
of those dollars are going to be used this summer.
I understand, and I just want to make sure that we're building that in as part of the assumption that we match what's been done in the past.
Okay, I'll look into that.
Perhaps to get the flexibility that we need on that is to put Wilson in, because when we earmarked Wilson, it was Wilson and Burbank, and we knew we were going first with Burbank. We had more definite numbers, but it was $5 million. So what if we put in Wilson and other needs as assessed by our facility staff after when we're going to be looking at things a little closer at our workshop on the 5th on facilities. So if there's another facility that is high on the need list, because if we anticipate that workshop is about the bond, but if we anticipate a need prior to the bond, are you guys following me?
Correct, because it doesn't mean we don't have regular maintenance that needs to be going on and other projects that need to come along. And I'm not sure what we're still talking about, bond versus 18 versus 20 versus some other date. But I think regardless of the bond, we have to be putting money away for maintenance and things breaking, because we've got buildings that go back to the 50s.
Well, and the other thing is I'm thinking about things that may not look attractive on a bond. That we have to sell the bond to the
Correct.
public, and so there's things that would be necessary, but maybe not attractive for a bond campaign. So what about when we do this? I'm going to make a proposal. We adopt this approval of this budget assumption with Wilson and another site, and put $5 million there as a budget assumption. And then we leave the reserve issue, the 10% reserve, or increasing the reserve issue for later. And then we add this to the list of assumptions here. So I'm adding a $5 million item right there.
Right. So
Trustee
I
Marks.
like the idea of looking at our facilities and preparing for that. And then I know we're deficit spending, so there's a concern with that. I know these are one-time monies that we're talking about for Wilson and other maintenance opportunities. I don't recall in my head what it is next year after 12%. I remember it dropping down and might be 5. I can't remember if it's 5 or 7 next year when the unassigned balance moves down, but from 12. So I would like to not to drop all the way down to 3. That's all I'm asking. We used to always have it at 4. That was our main thing, was we had our reserves always at 4%, and we were proud of that because we were above what the state told us we had to do. And even though 4%, 1% more than 3 wasn't a lot, but at least we were there. So I just would ask that we don't go below
So,
4%.
Trustee Walker.
so then the proposal looks like what we have here with a $5 million set aside for Wilson and some other project. We leave the reserve alone for a while,
Okay.
but there's an effort to look at what it would take to get out of deficit spending, or at least some concept of what it would take to get there. It's not going to happen quickly, but we ought to have some idea of what it would take to get there at some point, not in 20 years. And that is that, like we've said, that we're not going to get any more than we've got at this point. It's 2.5% a year if COLA stays there. And COLA is a fluctuating number. You know, if we come out of a growth state and we go into a non-growth state economy, COLA is coming down. And COLA could be at 0.5% in a quick minute.
Or zero.
Or zero. It doesn't take much. And the fact that they're putting it at 2.5, I think, is being generous. Because generally COLAs don't look that big. And if you've ever been on the receiving side of a raise that came with a COLA, it meant you got an extra dinner once a year. So the proposal is what we have, 5 million more facilities to cover up what we lacked and missed before, and an effort to determine what it would take to get out of deficit spending.
All right, are you making a motion?
I'm making sure I've got what you wanted covered.
Yeah.
So moved.
Okay. And we haven't heard from the other board members, but I would second that and then see if it needs to be modified at all. So.
But it gives a starting point, right?
Yeah. So the motion's been moved and seconded. We can have a discussion on it. So Trustee Brown.
So this 5 million number, I still need to know if we have a previous commitment for $5 million that's not allocated to specific projects. And I don't have the historical perspective to know when that was agreed to, but I know that I've been in the meetings where that is a number that's used every year. So I need to know, is that something that isn't an assumption because it's already there? Or is that, I don't want to talk $5 million and say, okay, now this number that was available for general purposes is now allocated to 2 specific projects, and we can't take care of our general purpose needs. So how does my answer about this previously allocated $5 million come about, or is it necessary to have that clarified for what we're trying to vote for tonight?
It's not necessary to have that clarified for tonight. As Superintendent Redquist stated, that this will be a target that moves over the next couple of months. I will research the $5 million for district-wide maintenance projects and see where that's at in this projection. If it is, if not, we will bring that back with that information.
Originally, Trustee Brown, when we had the 5 million, as I recall, it was Burbank and Wilson, and we were going to split it. That was what we thought the cost would be of the 2 projects. Then Burbank became exponentially much more. So then it ate the budget for Wilson. And so I'm just trying to keep that on. We've made a public commitment to that, and just trying to keep it on our assumption list. And so that was where the 5 million came from. It was there was an original estimate, I think, of a 3 million on Burbank, and it ended up being considerably more. So it was almost a 50-50 split. So. All right, so we have a motion. It's been moved and seconded, and so we're looking for approval of budget assumptions. And so, does anyone need the motion restated? Or are we good? All right.
Staff okay? Is staff okay with it?
Yeah.
I mean, with understanding it.
Yeah, I think we've only added one thing really to the expenditures and the assumption list of the 5 million for Wilson and then other projects. So all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Zerly, for your patience on that and that long item, and your staff as well, our great budget gals. Okay, so we are now on to item B8, the approval of the schedule of the Board of Education meetings. The schedule is here. It's really nice to have 2 years because if you're planning vacations. So woohoo, thank you.
But yeah.
Is there any questions from the board, or do we need a board staff report on this?
No, just that we looked at, spaced them out accordingly, based upon previous years and some minor tweaks that had to be done. But sometimes it'd be 3 weeks apart, sometimes 4, summers, etc. But this is our staff recommendation based upon the analysis that we did.
Thank you. All right. Are there any questions? Oh yes, Trustee Marks.
I noticed a couple of them were changed from what last year's was because I planned my vacation around them, and now I'm like in other places during that time. So I think it was the, I want to say it was the August one and I think it was the September ones. So do you know, I will manage. I mean, I'll have to be calling in from somewhere, but I didn't know how those ended up happening because I really work with the past calendar to try to plan for the future year.
Well, let me address the September.
Okay.
If you remember correctly, this year we had a September maybe 18th meeting, which falls after September 15th.
Oh, okay.
And so as we're working through,
that's
we had to
right.
move that also.
Okay.
So as we look through, we look at certain dates like September 15th and December 15th and March 15th and June 30th, and make sure that we have meetings before those target dates.
Okay, all right. And then because we used to meet fairly regularly every 3 weeks, I know we've reduced the number of board meetings that we have annually than what we used to have. So I know it does make for some long board meetings, but I'm amiable if you all are. But I just, as I plan out it, and I know we've been doing the less meetings for the last few years, so I try to work it that way. So I will need to call in on at least one of those 2 meetings since I worked with last year's calendar. So I don't like to do that, but if I had planned to be out of state or something, it's a little difficult. So thank you so much.
We understand.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments for board? All right, out to the audience. Are there any comments or questions from the audience? Seeing none, we'll back to the board for discussion and a motion, because this is an agenda item. Yes, Trustee Brown.
I'll move that we accept the proposed schedule for board meetings.
All right, the motion has been moved by Trustee Brown and seconded by Trustee West. All those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. This moves us on to item B9. And this is approval to vote for no more than one candidate for the CSBA Delegate Assembly for 2018. Mr. Ridquist, do we have a staff report on this or not really?
We have nothing other than what's written in the agenda item itself.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I read this as saying we may vote for someone.
Right.
So I'm not inclined to
vote
one way or the other. So that's where I stand. But
that's all right. I actually know Faye. I think she's done a good job. I'm gonna propose that we vote for Faye Lane. She's the only candidate on there, and so I move that we vote for Faye Lane for our delegate assembly.
Anyone else?
I just state that I missed the deadline because I was running around in this new job.
Oh, okay.
And last year I had sort of a heads up that you had to get the paperwork in on time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in reality, let's be honest, I wasn't going to beat Faye Lane, who's been sitting in that job forever and ever. Amen.
She decided to do it
So,
again, so yep.
That's why my name isn't on here. I missed that deadline from last year, and I didn't get the email in time. But it was like a long
We'd have to
Peyton
nominate
Manning
you.
bomb.
We have to nominate you in December anyway, so you have to have 2 nominations. So.
We had done that.
Oh, okay.
I missed the deadline. My
Oh.
fault.
All right then.
Day jobs can be tough.
So I made the motion. I believe Mr. Grembo. Did you second it?
All right. All those in favor state aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Okay.
All right. So the motion passes with one dissenting.
All right.
Trustee Newman. Okay, so this takes us on to the last two items on the agenda, which are the report of meetings attended by Board of Education members. I'm looking for lights. All right, Trustee Brown.
So I want to report on two meetings. I attend regularly the Education Partnership Collaboration meeting, and that Interim Superintendent Rydquist attended that with me, and I just want to thank him publicly for his participation there. Very important group of educators and business people and people from throughout the community that have interest in making sure that our students are receiving opportunities, and the collaboration that happens in that meeting is phenomenal. There was interesting discussion about math and engineering from the elementary level all the way up through what's happening at UC Merced, and interesting developments happening at MJC that we became aware of, that their engineering program was cut during slow times, and it looks like they're, because of the pressure coming from UC Merced, able now to bring that program back and may even become a satellite site for UC Merced's engineering schools. So great things, and you look at that and see what opportunities that provides to us, and the onus that it has upon us to make sure that our students are ready for those new opportunities. Also appreciate the focus that we had from SPY on a focus on career education at all levels, and I've been able to provide the district with some information that we had from CSPA about a great program that's happening in Southern California. I'm hoping that we can bring a group, SPY wants to go with us if we do, to go check out this program and see if we can't implement something like that even on a trial basis in one of our campuses here. So encourage the district to do that. And also I was able to attend Catalyst, and Superintendent Rydquist was with us at that meeting as well. Another good collaboration opportunity. So.
All right, Trustee Marks.
So I had the opportunity to attend Catalyst and appreciated Mr. Rydquist being there as well that day. Catalyst has been growing and has a lot of city leaders and elected officials, nonprofit leaders that attend that. So it's a good collaboration meeting, or an opportunity to meet with one another. And as it happened, the topic was on civil discussion, or being civil as we debate. And so it was very, very well done by Mr. Winther. And then also had an opportunity to ride with Mr. Rydquist and Becky Fortuna up to the Cal SSD meeting in Sacramento, and see Mr. Frost again, and Andrea Ball, who's also working with him. I did not realize that was the Andrea Ball. So anyway, to connect with me with that. She used to work with CSBA. But a great meeting with superintendents and school board members around the state, hearing the governor's budget and some positive comments and some negative comments, but we'll see where we go with that. But I appreciated just being in that environment again, and was thankful that I could go. So thank you for allowing me to do that. And then also the Linked Learning, I was there yesterday. They're having their conference right now in Anaheim, and the meeting that I'm on the board there, so we get to hear a lot of interesting ideas that are happening around the state. A lot of partnerships with business and UC system and community colleges all have excuse me, representatives on that board, and also the State Board of Education has a representative there. Little tickle. Anyway, but there was a reception afterwards that I wanted to just highlight. At the reception, they had the students do little tables, and very similar to our students, pathways, and fire and safety, culinary arts, and some robotics. Excuse me, just a sec. A really bad tickle. But they, in that, they had a paper that listed all their pathways at their school on one sheet, as there are different 6 high schools. And I thought it would be really great if we were able to do that in some capacity. Sorry. So that's all I'll say at this point.
Thank you, Trustee Marks. All right, Trustee Walker.
One meeting, because my day job got in the middle of the other one. I had intended to be in Sacramento, but software doesn't relent sometimes. But I did meet with the CBO, Mr. Zerly and his staff on the 1st, and I think it was probably one of the better meetings I've done as far as understanding the budget. He walked me through my questions on Title I, special ed, looking at how that's funded on ADA. I'll come back at some point. Mr. Herbst, I'm coming in your way. I'm going to figure out how to calculate that number quick, because it was one of the things he had pointed out that I thought was quite interesting is that when we look at special ed and how it doesn't get covered, well, you have to cover the gap between what they're giving us ADA in the fund and where we supplement and come on top of that. And so now I have the ability to go back and say, well, what did we supplement, so that we can define where is it that we're pulling out of our general fund to meet the needs that they're not funding us for. And then he helped explain to me the cafeteria fund, which was interesting because I sort of didn't get how that was a standalone business, but it was well worth the time. And I will put together a couple more categories at some point, because I think it's extraordinarily helpful to be able to sit and get a real good feel of how these things work together as you pull them piece out, piece out, piece out, so that you eventually end up with the big piece that we really do get to work with, which is LCFF. And it was probably one of the better spent hours I've spent. And hopefully the piece I took away with it from him was, we need better direction from the board to understand what you're looking for. And I hope we got some of that done tonight as far as how we approach that. But a very good use of time on my part, and I appreciate you taking the time with me.
All right, anyone else? All right, I had two fun things I got to do. Right now, let's see, Thursday's a final competition for the mock trial competition for our high school students. And as a member of the legal community, I was out being an attorney scorer. So I want to thank the members of our legal community, our judges, our attorneys for volunteering their time to come out and judge our amazing students. And also the instructors and the volunteers. There's attorney volunteers that work with each of these teams, or judge volunteers that work with each of these teams. It's just a tremendous amount of time that the community puts in. And if you really want to believe in the future, these kids are amazing, just up thinking on their feet. And doing a great job. So we'll see on Thursday night which one of I think it's neck and neck. I don't want to say, I don't want to misstate who was in the lead, but because I know they had a competition that it's on Thursday. So I judged the second round, and then I also got to be a judge all day at the speech tournament at Modesto High School. We have a speech team, a high school speech team, and speech club at two of our high schools, Enox High School and at Modesto High School. And so we have a long history in this district of forensics. And so it was great to see our kids, our students participating in that. And I'd love to see more students do that. So it was a lot of our staff members were there volunteering their day to be judges as well. And so we appreciate everybody volunteering their time for those great student activities that the kids get to learn. So it was I got to do fun stuff. So I'm going to leave the meetings with legislators with you. So all right, so items to be placed on future board agendas. All right, seeing none, I'm looking for a motion for adjournment. All right, it's been moved by Trustee Walker and seconded by Trustee Grenbow. We are adjourned. Oh, they